everybody, and thanks for clicking into another edition of Sit Down with Ed Brown. Today we're going to kind of go outside the box a little bit. We're not talking about just Bigfoot today. We're actually going to talk about Black Panthers, Bigfoot, the different cryptids, and how one correlates with the other. And I think it's very important to have conversations like this and to get out there and look at what other researchers are finding with other cryptids. So today we're going to bring in a young lady out of Kentucky, and we're going to talk to her, Miss Judith Hensley. How you doing, Miss Hensley? How are you?
I'm great. So nice to talk with you.
Oh, well, thanks for coming on. You know, we definitely, this is actually the first show we've done, by the way, where we're not keying in on Bigfoot. So this is going to be a lot of fun, and I'm interested in what you're doing. I think it's going to be great. Now, can I call you Judy, Judith, Miss Hensley? What do you want me to call you?
Judy is fine, like Gomer Pyle. Judy.
Judy, yes, ma'am. Judy, tell us what you do.
Well, I'm a retired school teacher, newspaper columnist, author, photographer.
Awesome. And you've been researching Black Panther sightings in the Appalachian Mountains?
Yes, I actually started when I was in college. That tells you how long it's been going on because I'm a retired teacher now. So over 40 years ago was my first panther sighting, and I was just so blown away by the whole experience that I started asking other people in the area, have you ever seen one? Have you ever,
Sure.
Have you ever actually had pictures of one? And, of course, people tell me they have pictures and then they don't want to share the pictures or they're afraid to share the pictures.
Right.
But I have talked to hundreds of people who say they have seen a Black Panther.
Awesome. You know, it's funny you say that because I was actually talking to someone earlier today who I was talking to, and I told them I was doing an interview tonight, and they said, who are you talking to? And I told them, and they said, no kidding, my wife saw one. And they live in the Appalachian Mountains. I get in trouble for saying Appalachia, so I'm trying to learn to say Appalachia. So I'll do that a lot today, I'm sure. But after the show, if you remind me, and I'll try to write it down, but I'm going to give you their information, and so you can at least hear, you can talk to them too, because they had a sighting themselves of a Black Panther in West Virginia. So hopefully that can turn into another lead for you.
Sure, that'd be fantastic.
Great. So let's back up a second. You said you were a retired teacher, you were a newspaper columnist, and you've got a great background. What was it about the unknown, or was it not so unknown? Because this didn't start for you until you actually seen it, right?
Right. Well, as a child, sitting on my grandfather's back porch in Harlan County in a little community called Martin's Fork,
mm-hmm.
You could hear after dark. It was always, after dark, and we'd sit on the back porch and tell stories, watch the lightning bugs or whatever when my family was here on vacation.
Sure.
And you could hear these eerie screams from one ridge to the other ridge. It's like one cat would scream, one cat would answer. And, of course, that didn't prove that it was a Black Panther because there was no actual visual sighting. Mm-hmm. But I'm telling you that the screams were something you would not soon forget. But I can't swear that was a panther as opposed to a bobcat or a, you know what I mean?
Sure.
But that experience was the very first experience, seeing one in person. And it happened, it's kind of a good story if you want me to share it.
Absolutely. Yeah, go right ahead.
Elmer and Irene Boggs. Elmer was the county extension agent for the University of Kentucky in McCrae County, Kentucky. And they had a hunting cabin up on Peters Mountain or Parker's Mountain in McCrae County. And my ex-husband and I had been up there with them for the weekend, and Mrs. Boggs left her glasses at the cabin. We were already off the mountain, and we had to go back up. So Mr. Boggs was a big storyteller, and he was telling us about all these panthers and catfish so big that divers were scared of them. And, he was a great storyteller. And so I was taking it all with a grain of salt because they like to play tricks on the city girl who grew up just outside of Chicago. They'd taken me night hunting, and they just really had a lot of fun out of my naivety. And so when he was telling all these tales, I was thinking he is just jerking my chain. They just want to get something else over on me. So we were coming back down the mountain, this little place called Monkey's Eyebrow. And there was a post office at that time at Monkey's Eyebrow, and a Black Panther went down the little embankment across in front of the Jeep, right in the headlights, and up the other side. And it wasn't all the way dark, so you had headlights on it, plus it was still light enough to see that it was a cat as wide as the Jeep was wide. Wasn't a house cat, wasn't a dog. And so Mr. Boggs just turns around and says, "I told you."
Wow.
Like it was a very common, he didn't get a bit excited. It was just a very common occurrence. So I started asking people there. At that time, I lived in Lexington and had grown up just south of Chicago, and so coming to the mountains in the country was fun time for me, but kind of a novelty. I didn't live in the Appalachian Mountains at that time, but I was just fascinated after I saw that big cat to start asking other people in that area. And it was like, well, sure, we're out in the woods all the time. Sure, we've seen a panther, we've seen this, we've seen that. So that continued with me till after I moved to Harlan County to take up my teaching career. And because of the storytelling that I'm a story gatherer. I probably need to tell you that about myself. I'm not a big scientific researcher, but I'm a story gatherer, and I love people and I love people's stories. And you can tell when you're talking to somebody face to face. If they're telling you a story that's, a bunch of hooey, they'll either have a smirk or a grin on their face to see if you're dumb enough to believe.
Right.
When they're telling you something that they've actually seen with their own eyes, there's an emotional factor that shows up in their facial expression, their body language, in their eyes that tells you, I saw something.
Sure.
It's a whole different ball game when you're talking to people that are, just trying to be smart alecks, and the people that sincerely, genuinely know that they saw something.
Right.
Those are the people that I like to gather stories from. Do I believe every single story I hear? If somebody tells me a story for the truth, I tend to believe that they're a person of integrity, and I'm not there to judge. I'm not there to change the scientific community. I'm just there to record what somebody wants to share with me.
Sure. So let me ask you, number one, Monkey's Eyebrow. What part of Kentucky is that? Can I give us an idea of where that is? Because that's obviously where it is could help.
It's in McCreary County, which is, part Daniel Boone National Forest.
Sure.
There's a lot of wilderness in McCreary County, and especially the part that we were in. You can look it up on a map. I think the post office since then has been relocated, joined with other post offices. I don't think you'd find the same building still sitting there, but I think the community is probably on the map.
Wow, Monkey's Eyebrow, and I wonder where it got that term. And before the interview, I wasn't aware of this, so this is kind of cool because being a Bigfoot researcher, something like that kind of sticks out at me. Like, well, maybe in the past something happened, or they saw something that would lead them to think monkey. You know what I mean?
Hey, I have no idea, but it certainly is a name that marks the place of my first encounter and is quite memorable.
Sure. Do you think there's any correlation between Bigfoot and Black Panthers? As far as like in particular areas, what's your findings on that? Well,
I'll be totally honest. There are a lot of Bigfoot stories in Harlan County. I have never ever seen a Bigfoot, but I have seen the structures that are associated, like on the show Finding Bigfoot. I learned a lot about what those researchers do by looking at their videos. And the teepee-like structures of wood, I've seen those things all over the place, but I never, until I started watching that show, I never associated that with a primate or that an animal did it. I guess I just assumed it was an act of nature.
Sure.
But there are a lot of stories in this area of people saying that they have seen something, Bigfoot, an ape-like creature, and it's in the same territory where you hear people say that they've seen Black Panther.
Okay, interesting. And actually, sorry, go ahead.
I say there are things in the woods that nobody is exactly sure, what all's out there. Interesting to me that there's like 15,000 species, new species identified every year. Most of those are insects, but sometimes there's a new primate, or sometimes there's a new cat, or a new, an animal that people in the research community were not even aware of, and I guess it takes a scientist to see it and label it to make it official, but the people who live in the area know they're there.
Absolutely. And actually my first sighting, and I call it a sighting even though it was a very long distance away, but and I can't prove it, so I don't really talk about it a whole lot, but my first sighting of a Bigfoot was in Harlan County also. So that's where I was in February of 2015. It was in Harlan County.
Well, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And so I definitely know they're there. But I've never seen a Black Panther. So tell us about, let's say, one of the stories that you collected, that you found more than just credible, but you definitely believe someone saw it because it was so close and they got such a good look at it. Can you tell us one of those stories?
I can tell you my own stories, but I have other people's too. But probably one of the closest encounters, and it was very accidental. I have never been out with a camera saying, "Oh, gee, let's go look for Black Panther." I mean, that's like so absurd that you could travel thousands of miles with a camera turned on and never see a Black Panther. So to say that I'm going to go look for Black Panther with a camera would be pretty foolish unless I knew exactly a territory, unless I was familiar with a range and a territory where they'd been seen repeatedly. But I was with a friend, Tricia Hawcom, and we were on Bagley Wildlife Management Area, and we were looking for elk because they, try to rehabilitate elk into the area.
Good.
So we had been up on the mountain and hoping to see an elk herd. There were some wild horses up there, and so I had my camera, and we'd seen the horses and didn't see any elk that day. And it wasn't dark yet, so we were kind of coming back down the mountain, just looking to see if there were any in the fields, and we were going to go back up. And she and I both saw something big and black under a bush. And I said, "Oh, look, it's a bear," because it was obvious that it was a very large creature sitting under a bush. And so we have lots of bear in Harlan County. I've taken hundreds of pictures of bear.
Sure.
And we just assumed that it was a bear. Well, I stopped the car. We were maybe 20, 30 feet away from it. And it stood up and walked out from under that bush, and it was a Black Panther. And it walked across this huge mining road on that mountain that's probably as wide as a 4-lane highway. And we watched it come out from under the bush, walk, it wasn't in a hurry, walk all the way across the road and go over the ditch line on the other side. So there was absolutely no mistaking, and there were two of us in the car that saw the whole thing. Well, I had the camera in my hand, and I was so flabbergasted that the camera's in my hand, and I'm trying to get it turned on and keep my eyes on the panther, and I couldn't get it on in time. Couldn't turn the camera on in time to get the picture because I was, if you see something that you're totally not expecting to see,
right,
you just have a different reaction time-wise, have a different reaction than if it was like I've seen elk plenty of times. I've seen bear and deer and other creatures in the woods. And so the first time I saw, like deer close-up, or the first time I saw a bear close-up, I had that same kind of initial reaction where your hands are twitching and your whole body's excited because you can't believe what you just saw up close.
Exactly.
So that panther, even though it was right there in front of us, and if I had had my camera already on, I could have gotten fantastic pictures, but I didn't. I didn't get anything.
Sure. Do you think that it's possible, and I'm just asking this just out of curiosity, let's say it's a mountain lion that's misplaced, if you will, and it just happens to be black. I mean, is that at all a possibility, or is that the same thing? Or and I don't, forgive my naivety, but I don't know. Is there a chance that it's a mountain lion that just happens to be black?
Well, the argument is that there is no such creature as a black panther, that if you see a big black cat, it is a melanistic phase of a jaguar or a leopard, or, could be a mountain lion, I guess. A melanistic thing where just the opposite of albinoism
sure
would result in a solid black creature of whatever species you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen albino deer, and seen pictures of lots of other albino animals. But the opposite end of that spectrum is the solid black. I don't know why there couldn't be a cougar or a, whatever kind of cat, solid black in these mountains. I have personally, I can't say for sure that I saw a tawny cougar. I think I did, but I wasn't close enough to give you my absolute word of honor that that's what
sure.
it was.
Of course.
But I saw it following an elk herd, and I was up on the mountain and looking down at it, so I could see it down in the weeds.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, it was probably a football field length away. So I could see it clearly, but I never saw its head. I never saw the face, so I can't say for sure that it was a cougar. But lots and lots of people in this area are now giving reports of seeing cougar, which, I never heard of that. Even when I was a child growing up and heard panther tales,
right.
I never heard cougar tales. But now people are beginning to see them in this area.
Sure. And now a cougar is, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't a cougar smaller than a panther?
Well, since I've never seen one, I can't verify, but I think they're similar. I've heard that panther are bigger, but then I've also heard that they're similar in size. And
sure.
that the most telltale physical characteristic is the long black tail, because the tail it's not like a house cat, it's not like a dog. It's about the length. It looks like it's the length of the cat from shoulder to hip, and maybe a little longer.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no other creature that I've ever seen anywhere that has a tail like that. So I can't swear to you that it's, I've just been doing the research on computer before you called about mistaken identity. That's the big thing in the scientific community, mistaken identity.
Sure.
You may think you've seen a black panther, but you didn't really see one. You may have seen a black jaguar, a melanistic cougar, a melanistic bobcat, whatever. I'm not going to argue with any of that. I don't really even care if it's a whole separate species, but there is a big black cat species present in these mountains, and I have all kinds of eyewitness accounts besides my own.
Mm-hmm.
You asked if I could tell any other stories from people, and I talked to a fellow just this week who said, well, I'll write this down for you, but when I was a little boy, I was in the yard and I was playing next to a chain link fence, and, in my yard, and I heard, the of a rattlesnake. And
sure.
so he said he looked up and the thing was in striking distance, and he kind of froze. And he said he heard something over his head and looked up, and there was a panther, a big black cat in a tree. He said it jumped over him, got the rattlesnake, jumped over the chain link fence into a field, and killed the rattlesnake, and then went on off into the woods.
Wow.
So, and he says even though people didn't believe him when he was little, that it's as clear today as it was when he was a little boy.
Sure. That would be scary. I mean, can you imagine having two separate predator, animals with that close to you at one time? I mean, that would be, wow.
Well,
either one of them.
I thought it was really interesting that the big cat, took a protective stand over a child.
Sure.
So anyhow, you can ask me anything you want about stories that I've heard about. Excuse me, I need to get a drink.
Sorry.
Bigfoot stories or Black Panther stories or other sightings. I've had other sightings besides the two that I've told you.
Right. I guess, I mean, with the story you just told me about the snake, I guess I would see that a little differently. As opposed to taking a protective stance over the child, I would see it more like it was like, okay, I'm going to get that snake before you do because I'm going to eat it. You know what I mean? That's kind of how I would envision this Black Panther reacting to seeing a snake. You know what I mean? And so that's interesting, though. That's a really cool story.
Yeah, I thought that was really fascinating. And the most interesting qualities about people who share their stories with me, so many people have said, I'll tell you this story, but I don't want you to print it and put my name with it because I don't want to be laughed at. I don't want to be scoffed at. But I'll tell it to you because I trust you, but I don't want to be made fun of. And I actually had someone very recently send me a video of a Black Panther, but under the same conditions. We're willing to let you see it. Our family's willing to let you look at it, but you can't use our name and you can't share it with anybody else. So this family was I think they were in a truck, and somebody, you can hear it as it's happening. Somebody says, "Oh my gosh, do you see that?" And so the person with the camera is like, "Holy cow." So they train the camera on the cat, which is about a football field away. It looked like maybe, what is that, 300 yards?
300 feet, yeah, 100 yards, yeah.
Okay, 300 feet. Well, it was close enough that there was no mistaking what the animal was, and they zoomed in as far as they could with the camera. Mm-hmm. Right there it was, just walking at the tree line across the field. But because they asked me not to share their name or ever show the video, I never will.
Of course, and that's to be commended. I think that's something that lacks in the Bigfoot community is people who would honor that request. So it sounds like, based on the few stories you've told me, they're not afraid of people, or they're not intimidated by people. You mentioned yours got up and walked slowly across the street. The one was sitting in a tree right by a child. One walking down the tree line, but just walking. So it sounds like they're not really intimidated by people. I mean, does most of your stories sound like that? Yes.
I have some older stories where it did seem like they viewed people as prey. Mm-hmm. But most of the stories that I hear now, it's, people, just like my friend and I the day that we were looking for elk and saw the panther. When people see a panther, it's not because they're out in the woods looking for panther. It's a totally unexpected experience. And the other commonality, I got off track, but the other commonality, besides the physical characteristics, is that the person can tell you exactly where it was and say, I can take you and show you the spot. That's always a reaction. It's not like, oh, well, I don't remember where it was or it was somewhere.
Right.
It's like, no, I can take you to the exact spot. I can take you to the rock it was sitting on. I can take you to the log that I saw it jump over. And so I think that's really a good characteristic of knowing when somebody's maybe jerking their chain or not.
Sure.
But if it's something that they've seen and that has made a huge impression, then of course they're going to remember the specific time of day, what they were doing, when they saw it, what happened, their response, and the crossroads or the nearest community or the biggest tree or whatever. They just have the whole thing is like, where were you on 9/11? Well, where were you when you saw a panther?
Right.
It's the same thing. It's like it's embedded inside of you and you just don't forget.
Have you ever had someone tell you, I could take you to the spot where I saw it, or not just you, but anybody that you've heard of, and they go to investigate it and they find a large feline track or something of that nature?
I've been really remiss on that part of my curiosity about these big cats, but I do have pictures. I sent you some pictures. One of them is of a track and a foot beside of it to give a comparison. And actually, I'm going to go back up there since the ground is so soft. I'm going back to the same place tomorrow with my camera to see if there's any tracks about.
Wonderful. And we're gonna call this right now. If Judith finds anything tomorrow, Judith, will you call me and let me know, and maybe we can talk again and maybe add it to the end of this interview? Would that be possible?
Sure, that would be fine. And if I should find something that I can get a picture of, tracks, I'll be a little smarter this time. The last time all I had was a foot, an adult foot to put next to it. But I can take a tape measure. If I can find some plaster of Paris, I may even do that.
That would be a great idea. That would be so cool. What is the range that you've heard these sightings in? And I don't know, say from Harlan County to Pittsburgh or whatever. I mean, how big is the area of the reports you're hearing from?
Well, I got stories based on, it may have been how I got in contact with you, but I posted something on Facebook about Panther Tales, a book that I'm working on, Panther Tales, and I posted it on Appalachian Americans, and within like 48 hours, there had been over 600 responses, over 330 people contacted me with a story, 117 people shared it, and it was coming in so fast that I couldn't even keep up with it. I had to pull it down because they were coming from everywhere. New Jersey, Indiana, Ohio, Tennessee, Virginia, Kentucky, West Virginia, Arkansas, and then I had people saying, this is not really in the Appalachian Range, but I'd like to tell you about one that I saw, da-da-da-da-da. Well, sure. It was totally unexpected to get that kind of response from people in that short amount of time. So if I had the ability to keep it going, keep it up and keep it going, I dare say there would have been, hundreds more that would have come forward. And I was really impressed with people that shared their story after the hecklers got online and started saying, you're stupid, you're an idiot, there's no such thing as a Black Panther, you don't know what you're talking about, just literally being cyberbullies.
Right.
Like, whoever put up a story, there would be somebody come along and respond with, well, you're stupid or you're crazy or they don't exist or blah, blah, blah. But the people that continued to share their stories were so adamant about, yes, I know what I saw. I don't care what you say. I know what I saw. And that also speaks to me that people are absolutely seeing something. I may not be able to tack a species name onto it, but there are big black cats present throughout Appalachia and beyond that people see on a fairly regular basis.
And it sounds like it's in a really large area too. This isn't just the size of a state park. This is the size of an entire region of the United States.
Right, hundreds of miles. Hundreds of miles. Kind of like the Bigfoot thing, you know, I from the information that I've seen in the documentaries I've watched, they pop up all over the place. You know, from California to New York, from Michigan to Florida, and in every other continent across the world. So if there is a big black cat, whether it's a separate species that we could call Black Panther that's separate from any other cat species, or whether it's a big cat species in a melanistic phase or a genetic mutation, I don't know, and I don't really care at this point. I just care that people are seeing it and they want to be believed.
Sure. How far back do your sightings go? What's the oldest sighting that you've heard of?
Personal stories told to me and passed down, you know, from generations within the same family.
Sure.
Go back to the early 1800s in this immediate area. Like one lady in a log cabin was cooking meat on the, you know, on the fireplace or on a wood burning stove.
Sure.
And she had the window open, not a glass window, but the wooden kind where they would, you know, shutter it in at night and just open it up during the daytime.
Right.
And a panther literally jumped in through the window because of the smell of the meat. And so there she was herself in the cabin with a big black panther and meat in the skillet. She grabbed the, you know, quick-thinking lady, she grabbed the meat out of the skillet, threw it out the window, and the cat jumped back out to get the meat, and she closed the shutter behind it.
Wow.
Another tale is about a lady who had to pass between Harlan County and Lee County, Virginia, across the mountain to a place called Rose Hill. And so she had her children with her, and she traveled this path frequently. Mm-hmm. And there was a Black Panther that was living in that area that she had seen and she was terrified of. And she tried to tell her husband, you know, and they only had like one rifle, and he took it with him to go hunting. And she was so sure that thing was sooner or later was going to try to attack her or her children that she took the biggest butcher knife she had and hid it in her apron. And that was her defense with her, you know, with her children going back and forth on that path across the mountain. Well, it finally did attack, and she had her knife ready. And even though it got a hold of her and clawed her, she killed it because she had that knife in her apron, ready for it.
Sure. And she actually killed it?
Yes.
And was there any documentation of the dead cat, you know, that was offered or anything of that nature?
That was in the 1800s also.
Gotcha.
Another, a little later than that, around probably late 1800s, early 1900s, there was a lady traveling with a group of people on horseback, and she had a nursing baby, but she also had other children, you know, that were traveling on foot across the mountain. And so when the panther attacked, and she sacrificed the baby to save her other children.
Sure. Oh.
So I don't
That'd be
like
a horrible decision. Yeah.
I don't like that story so much.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, I mean, that's a horrible story, and it's a horrible situation to be in, and it's scary to even think, to be honest with you. You know, I couldn't imagine, you know, having to sacrifice one of my children to save the other. You know, that would be a horrible situation.
Horrible situation, but I guess she thought if she didn't act quickly, that she would lose them all and maybe her own life too. I don't know. an old story. It may have been embellished. I don't really know. I just know that it was handed down and came to me. And you asked about the oldest stories. Well, there are accounts that I've read from like the 15, 16, 1700s of what they call panthers in this country when the Europeans came here to settle.
Mm-hmm.
But the trouble was they called a lot of different cats, they called them panther. So whether they were referring to a big black cat known as Black Panther or whether they were referring to bobcat or cougar, they just called all the wild cats, they tagged that name on panther. So, and I'm afraid I'm talking too much, but I want to say
you're doing great.
I want to say this before I forget.
Sure.
The thing that convinces me that there's something out there, and even though I've never personally had any kind of a Bigfoot encounter or anything like that, but the same as with the Black Panther are the Native American accounts that go back hundreds of years. And I think they were not making cave drawings of Black Panthers and Bigfoot so that a bunch of smart aleck people in 2018 could come along and say, "Oh, look at this fraud."
Right.
You know, they were living in nature. They were woodland inhabitants, and what they recorded in their culture and in their drawings and in their music and in their folk tales was based on the world that they saw. They were not trying to impress European settlers. They weren't trying to impress story gatherers. They weren't trying to impress skeptics. They weren't trying to do anything except record their life as it was at that time.
Sure.
So I don't know how anybody can debate that. How would they have made it up just to impress somebody in 2018?
Right. And I think that's a good point. You know, and we talk about that a lot in the Bigfoot research, is when you go back to look at the history of Bigfoot, there's one very interesting report, and it's from Leif Ericson, you know, where he stated that they were, and I'm paraphrasing, but he was basically ran off by a tribe of giant, hair-covered men with deep dark eyes and a horrible stench. All right. Now you have to wonder. Leif Ericson we would consider him to be a hairy man now. You know, big beard. You know, I'm sure. What did he consider hairy? You know what I mean? So, and I don't think, like you, I don't think that he made that story up or that he wrote that in his diary just so that in 2018, you know, a bunch of hecklers, as you called them so aptly, a bunch of hecklers could, you know, make fun of people who believed in Bigfoot. You know, there has to be some, in every myth, there is some truth to it, you know. So I definitely agree with you, and I think that's a very interesting and good remark.
Okay, I have a question for you about Leif Erikson, because some
Sure.
of the listeners may not even realize that Leif Erikson was a Viking explorer that came to this continent before Christopher Columbus. But do you know the year that he recorded that encounter?
I don't know the year off the top of my head. I don't know. I wish I could answer that, but I do not know. Are you going to tell me?
I think it's, I'm not sure. No, I don't want to say, but it was definitely way pre-Columbus, and he was a Viking explorer. So, I mean, that kind of gives you a time period between 700 and 1400. Right.
And it's funny you say it, because for some reason I was thinking 12-something, but I don't know. I'm only just guessing, you know. And but you're exactly right. We're talking about something even before Christopher Columbus. So that definitely gives it a like you said, some even more credibility, you know. So it's a good point.
Well, another thing that the people who are naysayers or discredit anybody who says they've had an eyewitness account is, well, where's the skeletons? I've never seen a panther skeleton in the woods. I've never seen a skeleton. But I've never seen a rattlesnake skeleton yet. I've seen rattlesnake, and I doubt that people would dispute they exist in these mountains.
Sure.
So the fact that there is no there are no skeletal remains that have been recovered to public knowledge. Doesn't mean that they weren't there. You know, there's a video about a deer carcass and how quickly it is consumed and goes back into critters and into the earth, and it's phenomenal. It's like a time-elapse thing where they show the flies and the maggots and the other creatures in the woodlands that come and help totally annihilate the carcass and get all the nutrients out of it. And in a very few days, there's no sign of a carcass having been there.
You are absolutely right. And I saw a very similar experiment where they took a deer and they actually wired it down so it couldn't just be drug away. You know, I mean, they had it staked in the ground, wired down so it couldn't go anywhere. And they expected it to be gone within several months. And it was like a week. It was completely 100% gone, you know. And it has a lot to do with our environment as well. So I definitely see where you're coming from, and I agree.
And I think, you know, predatory animals, or if we can link Panther and Bigfoot, whatever their social habits are, whatever their social structure is totally unfamiliar to us. So they may go under a rock cliff to die. How do we know where they...
Absolutely right.
Where they choose to leave their body, their spirit leaves their body. How do we know, you know? I mean, I don't think there's anyone arrogant enough to say that they know everything about everything. And to me, the more answers we get, the more questions are generated.
Sure. Unfortunately, there are people in the Bigfoot community who think they know everything. But that's, you know, it's okay. You know, there's a lot of great people out there. There's a lot of great researchers, and I'm proud to know most of them. So we're actually making steps. We're taking our skills and our experience and our knowledge, and a lot of people are starting to share those, and we're coming together and trying to narrow down to a common understanding of what these animals are. And do you see, in fact, and that's actually another great question, and I don't mean to hold you up all night. This could go on forever. I'm having a great conversation. I love talking to you. Do you see there are more people investigating Black Panthers besides yourself, or is it a very small niche group of people doing that?
I don't think anybody in this area is investigating. They just take it as a part of natural surroundings. People here don't see it as anything peculiar or odd. They don't see it as, oh, wow, we found something that nobody else has ever seen any time ever on the planet. It's more an attitude of, well, they're out there. Of course they are. I've seen one. My grandpa saw one. Uncle Herbert saw one. You know, it's a commonplace part of life in this area.
Sure.
One of the guys who posted a message, you know, being obnoxious about Black Panther, said that he was like a world-class hunter. He hunted all over North America and around the world, big game species, and he had never seen a Black Panther, and he didn't know what I had seen, but he could guarantee me on his life and $1 million that whatever I saw wasn't a Black Panther. So I wasn't trying to be smart aleck, but I sent him back a message and said, well, I hope you're prepared to meet the Lord, and I won't hold you to the $1 million.
Very good.
If you've seen one, no matter what naysayer comes along, if you've seen one yourself, especially if you've seen, in my case, I've had about 6 sightings over my lifetime. Uh-huh. It doesn't matter who says what or who tells me they're not there or you just imagined it. I know what I saw. I may not be able to identify the species or if it was a melanistic phase of another cat. Doesn't matter to me. I know what I saw, and I don't mind if it's a melanistic stage of some other big cat because I know it was there.
Sure. Well, Judith, you said you were writing a book called Panther Tales. Is that your first book, or do you have anything out already?
No, I've been part of about 30 book projects. I think I currently have like 16 in print, and this one, Panther. It will be Panther Tales and Woodland Encounters. So if any of your listeners have a panther tale that they'd like to share with me, or a big cat story, even if it's not a Black Panther, I would surely love to hear from people in different places. And as I said, I'm not anybody's critic. I'm not anybody's judge. I am a story gatherer.
Sure. Very good. Very good. And if somebody wanted to find your books, where would they go to find your books?
Amazon.com or Kindle.
And
Judith Victoria Hensley.
Judith Victoria Hensley? Okay.
Yes, Judith Victoria Hensley. I also have an author page on Facebook, I think with most of the covers from my recent books, anyhow, that are there, if there's anything they're interested in. I have about 3-4 children's books. I have some Appalachian culture books. I have some women's Christian devotional books. I have a variety. So if anybody wants to look, I'd love to. I thank you for the opportunity to tell that, but I would really, really like to hear from people about this Panther Tale book.
Well, I'll tell you what, I've got a feeling your message inbox will probably start getting some dings, and because we have, what I have found is it doesn't matter what our niche is in the cryptid world, whether it be Bigfoot, Black Panther, Mothman, Jersey Devil, whatever it may be, we still find ourselves interested in the other cryptids as well. I mean, I know, for example, I tell people all the time, I actually enjoy the paranormal more than I do even the Bigfoot. I just found a niche in the Bigfoot, and I've enjoyed it, but I definitely love the paranormal more. So I'm sure that there are going to be a lot of Bigfooters, and keep in mind that a lot of Bigfooters are out in the woods a lot. So who knows? You might even get some messages from people saying, hey, I'm a Bigfooter, but I saw a Black Panther, So I think you're probably going to get some, maybe 2 or 3 anyway, and we hope so, and we hope that you can follow up on those and help find some answers. Okay, Judith, one more quick thing, and I understand that you are going to be speaking at an event in April. Tell us about that. What are you going to talk about?
Okay, it's the first Harlan Crypto Conference, and I will be talking about Black Panthers and the research that I've currently doing, if I find any tracks or if I were lucky enough to get a photograph from somebody. But the tales that have come in, and I literally have hundreds of tales from people about Black Panther sightings. So I think I'll have about 45 minutes, and that'll barely scratch the surface. But I'm looking forward to people such as yourself and all the other researchers that are going to be there that are primarily Bigfoot.
Uh-huh.
I'm fascinated. The fact that I haven't seen one doesn't deter me from believing that you guys who say you have absolutely seen something.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to be there as well, and just so everybody knows, that's going to be April 21st, the Harlan County Cryptid Con, and that's going to be in Harlan, Kentucky on April 21st. And you know what I like most about this event, Judith?
What's that?
Is the fact that it is 100% free to the general public. Anybody who wants to come can come, and they can come for free. It doesn't cost anything to meet the speakers, to talk to them, to hear their experience, to share their experience. You get to listen to all the speakers talk. I think it's going to be a fun event. I am really looking forward to it. And now that I've actually had a chance to talk to you more, I'm actually looking forward to meeting you as well. And if you don't mind, go ahead and have a couple of your books ready for me, autographed, because I'm going to want them, just so you know. Great. I look forward to meeting you and all the other people because, can I say one thing about being a science teacher and the scientific? Of course. You can say anything you want. We're all friends here, Judith.
I don't know how we are time-wise, but
we're good.
It's so important to remember that in the scientific method, there are steps that are followed But if you've made up your mind beforehand that something doesn't exist, or if you've made up your mind before you do an experiment of what the results are going to be and you won't accept anything else, then it's not a valid research endeavor.
Amen.
It's not a valid experiment if you've already made the conclusion before you do the research.
You are so right, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I have said privately, I've said publicly, I've said 100 times, when you reach a point where you've already made your mind up, you are no longer researching. You are now working on a hypothesis, which is fine. You know, it's perfectly okay, as long as you stress, I'm not researching anymore. I'm working on what I think it is, you know, and that's perfectly fine, or what I think it isn't, whatever, you know, whatever the case may be. But you are absolutely right. When you no longer accept an answer or a possible outcome because it doesn't fit into your realm of belief, you are no longer researching. You are exactly right. I love that you said that. Thank you.
Well, it's been great talking to you. Lots of fun. I hope I didn't talk too much.
Judith, you were awesome. We love having you on the show. Hopefully tomorrow you find something and you get to come back on and we'll talk about what you found. You know, we're excited. We definitely want to add to this. And of course, once we're done, don't hang up right away, because I do want to share some information with you just off the air, if that's okay. But Judith, do you have anything else in closing, something else you want to talk about, or anything that maybe we didn't cover?
No, I think you did an amazing job with the work that I've seen of yours on YouTube. I'm so impressed with the work that you've done, and the Bigfoot community at large should be taken seriously because of all the man-hours and all the personal interviews and all the woodland research that has been accomplished is phenomenal, truly phenomenal. Kudos to you guys.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to speak for everybody in the Bigfoot community. Thank you for what you've done, because whether people see it or not, there is a correlation, you know. And folks, let's talk about that real quick. And Judith, I'm sorry, I hope I'm not holding you up. You know, we've got at least as much time as we need. But when Judith, if you listen to this interview, Judith is saying the same thing that a lot of Bigfooters are saying. She's getting hecklers. She's getting, you know, how, you know, oh, that's stupid, that's silly, there's no such thing as this or that or whatever. You know, she's getting the same thing that Bigfooters get. She's looking for something that has still not been, quote, unquote, I'm doing the thing with the fingers even though you can't see me. She's doing something that isn't proven yet by science, all right? But Judith makes a great point a minute ago. She said the people who live there accept it as it is. It's just there, you know? And I love that, because if science, I feel like if science were to get more involved in the cryptid aspect, and I understand it, you know, there's funding and, you know, reputations and blah, blah, blah. But if they did it, we could probably find some answers to some of these questions. What do you think, Judith?
Well, sounds like a good idea to me. But different things, some minds out there. What do you think?
I tell you what, we gotta pull some chains and get some things going, because we definitely need to get science more involved. And while I definitely agree with you that there is a particular process involved in the scientific method, and most people aren't really following that, you know. And I would like to see more of the researchers start following a more scientific method. You know, really the only way we're going to prove it is if we do that, right?
Right, and the thing that you guys have done for me is, and you in particular nudged me about, have you gone back and done more research in that area? So that's why I'm going back tomorrow, hoping that I can find some tracks in the very, very moist soil, since we've had rain for weeks on end. It ought to be a good time. If that cat is still up there, I ought to be able to find a track somewhere. Sure. If I go back to its familiar territory.
Right. Well, good luck with that. And Judith, if you find anything, please don't hesitate. Give me a call. let me know, and we'll touch base on it, and we'll just add it to the end of this. And if there's, you have anything else you want to add?
Just thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, Judith, you're very welcome. Thank you for coming on the show, and it's definitely been a great conversation. I've enjoyed having you, and I think maybe down the road we might try to get Judith back on the show and maybe follow up on some of her research. I think it's a great idea. So, but for now, guys, listen, thanks for clicking in, and for now, we are out.